I didn't just key his car. I carved Mama's Boy Loser into his driver's side door, and I'd do it again tomorrow. Mama's Boy Loser do to deserve having his private property turned into your personal billboard for pathetic insults? The little weasel posted a video online bragging about how he trained my sister by dumping her after he got what he wanted, and his 50,000 followers were laughing at her pain.
The television courtroom had been the stage for every brand of human absurdity imaginable. Plaintiffs who claimed their aura was damaged by a neighbor's bad vibes. Defendants who argued a handshake constituted a binding real estate contract. Expert witnesses who cited dream interpretations as forensic evidence. But in Judge Judith's storied gavel-pounding career, one thing remained certain. She had heard it all. Until the moment Corinne Prescott opened her mouth and shattered that certainty forever. The air didn't just leave the room. It was vacuum sealed out by the sheer, staggering audacity of her claim. Your Honor, my 7-month-old son was the only witness. He's given me a full, verbatim account of the event. Let that sentence hang in the dead silence it created. The court reporter's fingers froze over her machine. The bailiff's professional stoicism cracked into pure, unvarnished disbelief. And Judge Judith? She didn't blink. She didn't sigh. She became preternaturally still, a predator catching a scent she'd never encountered before. This wasn't a liar. This was something else. And the 22 minutes that followed weren't about winning a case. They were a surgical dismantling of a dangerous reality. A live wire intervention that would trigger a child welfare investigation before the plaintiff could even reach her car. But here's the gut punch they never saw coming. This wasn't a scam artist. This was a genuine crisis disguised as a small claim suit. What unfolded in that studio under the blazing lights was a psychological ticking time bomb, and Judge Judith had just seconds to decide which wire to cut. Before we step into the most clinically shocking case in television courtroom history, you need to hit subscribe right now. If you're ready to see a master jurist confront a delusion so airtight it believes itself, ring that notification bell. This isn't just a verdict. It's a rescue mission. Comment below with the most insane justification you've ever heard someone use, because I promise you, it won't touch this. And stick to the very end, because the turn this takes 8 minutes in will rewrite everything you think you know about this story. The paperwork was deceptively simple. Corinne Prescott versus Liam Chun, a cut-and-dried property damage claim for $3,000. Corinne, a 36-year-old self-described parenting content creator, was suing her downstairs neighbor for an incident where his cat allegedly destroyed a luxury baby carrier and, critically, inflicted severe emotional distress upon her infant son, Noah. On paper, it was petty neighbor drama. The kind Judge Judith could resolve in 5 minutes with a well-aimed dose of New York sarcasm and brutal logic. But Judge Judith's instincts, honed over decades in family and criminal court, twitched the second she read Corinne's attached statement. The language wasn't just aggrieved. It was unhinged in a specific clinical way. It spoke of targeted vibrational attacks and referenced her son's advanced empathic receptors. This was an exaggeration. This was a window into an altered state. A background check painted a concerning portrait. Corinne Prescott lived in a sleek high-rise, but her real home was the echo chamber of fringe internet forums. Her social media showed a steep decline. From normal mommy blogging to increasingly isolated posts about indigo children, her son's telepathic, milestones, and rants against the medical cabal suppressing truths about infant consciousness. The building manager's discreet statement noted 7 formal complaints from Corinne in 4 months about hypersonic frequencies from Liam's apartment, poisonous intent sensed in the hallway, and finally the cat incident. The defendant, Liam Chun, was a 30-year-old software engineer who worked from home with his elderly, lethargic rescue cat, Mochi. His response was baffled and wary. The incident never happened. Security footage showed nothing. The lawsuit was filed precisely 1 day after he'd politely asked Corinne to move a baby swing blocking the shared fire escape. The studio audience hummed with anticipatory gossip as the cameras rolled. They were primed for a showdown. The entitled influencer versus the nerdy cat guy. Judge Judith settled behind the bench, her eyes briefly meeting those of a producer. A silent signal passed between them. This one was different. Contingencies were in place. Karen made her entrance like a queen stepping onto her personal stage. Her hair was perfectly styled, her outfit a carefully curated blend of maternal warmth and professional chic. On her hip, in an organic cotton sling, was Noah, a cherubic 7-month-old chewing on a silicone necklace. She carried a binder thick with evidence, her chin held high. She wasn't here for justice. She was here for validation, for the final public vindication of her truth. She glanced at the cameras, already crafting the headline, "Heroic Mom School's Judge Exposes Systemic Ignorance." Judge Judith launched in with laser focus. "Miss Prescott, you're alleging Mr. Chen's cat caused damages and traumatized your child. In your own words, describe the event." Karen didn't just describe. She performed. Her voice was a melodic, condescending instrument. "Your Honor, Mr. Chen's feline, which he negligently allows to roam as a predatory energy, deliberately targeted my son's sanctuary, his premium ergonomic carrier, and attacked it with clear malicious intent." She paused, stroking Noah's head. "But the property damage is merely the symptom. The trauma to Noah's psyche is the crime." First red flag. Judge Judith's pen hovered. "Stick to the tangible event, ma'am. What did you see happen?" Karen waved a hand dismissively. "If you'd allow me to establish the energy of the situation, you'd understand. Mr. Chen cultivates a chaotic atmosphere. His pet is merely an extension of his own irresponsible." "Miss Prescott?" Judge Judith's voice dropped a dangerous octave. The audience hushed. "I asked what you saw, not your analysis of his aura. Did you witness the cat touch your property? Yes or no?" The sigh Karen emitted wasn't just frustration. It was theatrical contempt, a sound reserved for fools. She rolled her eyes toward the ceiling. "It's clear you're not approaching this with the necessary holistic framework. Maybe if I could explain without being interrupted?" She let the implication hang, insultingly. The stillness in the courtroom became electric. You could hear the IF system whir. Judge Judith leaned forward, her gaze locking onto Karen like twin spotlights. "Let me be exceptionally clear," she said, each word a chip of ice. "Did you just sigh in exasperation at me? In my courtroom? Did you just imply that I am obstructing your story?" A lesser person would have crumbled. Karen Prescott smiled. It was a pitying smile. She bounced Noah gently, turning her body as if to include the audience in her martyrdom. "Your Honor, with respect, you preside over disputes about drywall and parking spots. My case involves the psychological welfare of a profoundly sensitive child. The context is everything. My son isn't a standard issue baby. His cognitive and perceptual fields are light years ahead of developmental charts." Judge Judith didn't flinch. She advanced methodically. "What is your evidence the cat caused the damage?" Karen's face lit up with triumphant glee. This was her moment. "I have an eyewitness, an impeccable source who is present, whose perception is unclouded by societal programming, and who has given me a detailed account." "And who is this witness?" Judge Judith asked, her voice flat. Karen beamed, hoisting Noah higher. "My son, Your Honor, Noah. He was in the carrier. He experienced the assault directly, and he told me everything. He described the cat's aggressive posture, the sound of the fabric tearing his own fear. He communicates with me, verbally, with precise language." The room didn't gasp. It inhaled in one stunned, unified shock. The bailiff's eyes widened. Liam Chun stared, open-mouthed. Noah gurgled, blowing a bubble. Judge Judith placed her pen down with deliberate slowness. "Ms. Prescott, your son is 7 months old. Correct?" "Chronologically, yes," Karen said, launching into her rehearsed lecture. "But linear age is a primitive construct for a being like Noah. He's been communicating intentionally since 4 months. He has opinions, memories, and the verbal capacity to express them. To those who are attuned, how many recognized words does he speak?" Judge Judith's question was a scalpel. "He doesn't perform on command for skeptics." Karen scoffed, her defensiveness rising. "Our connection is profound. Just last night, he told me the avocado in his puree was suboptimal and expressed a preference for mango. I document everything. She produced the leather-bound journal, handing it over with the flourish of a lawyer submitting a smoking gun. Judge Judith opened it. The entries were meticulous, dated, timed. Elaborate dialogues. Philosophical musings attributed to Noah. Descriptions of colors he remembered from a past life. It was the diary of a profound, shared psychosis. Judge Judith turned a page, then another. The courtroom waited, the silence thick enough to choke on. She looked from the journal to Karen's eager, proud face, then to the oblivious infant drooling on his mother's shoulder. A critical line was being crossed, not just in the case, but in her judicial duty. Miss Prescott, Judge Judith began, her voice unervingly calm. Have you shared these communications with your pediatrician? Karen's posture stiffened, her face hardening into a mask of disdain. Pediatricians are gatekeepers of a broken model. They pathologize genius. They want to medicate curiosity and box children into percentiles. I've done my own research. There are entire communities online, mothers of crystalline children, starseeds who understand. Noah's abilities are a documented phenomenon they refuse to acknowledge. Judge Judith closed the journal, setting it down with finality. I am going to tell you a medical fact, not an opinion. A 7-month-old infant cannot speak in sentences. They cannot relate narrative accounts of past trauma. They do not critique produce. What you are describing is not advanced development. It is impossible. The color rose in Karen's neck. You're blind. Just because you've never seen, it doesn't mean it isn't real. He speaks to me. I'm his mother. I'm the one who's with him every second. He trusted me with this truth, that he was attacked, that he's scared. And you're dismissing him because it doesn't fit in your legal textbook? The raw desperation in her voice now mixed with the grandiosity. It was the sound of someone clinging to the edge of a cliff, convinced the cliff is a palace. Judge Judith made a decision. It was no longer about the carrier. Ms. Prescott, answer this with absolute honesty. Do you truly, in your core, believe you are having verbal conversations with your infant son? That you hear his voice forming these words? Karen looked around wildly, searching the faces in the audience for an ally, finding only shock and confusion. Her eyes glistened with furious, betrayed tears. Yes, she whispered, then stronger, her voice breaking. Yes, I do. I hear him. Why is that so hard to believe? Why does everyone want to call me crazy? He's my child. He needs me to bear witness to his reality. That animal terrorized him, and he told me so. Are you calling my son a liar? Are you calling me insane? The plea was heart-wrenching and terrifying in equal measure. This was the core of the delusion, a profound, unshakable fusion of her identity with a fantasy version of her child. To challenge the fantasy was to attack her very soul. Judge Judith did not retreat. She leaned into her microphone, her words clear, heavy, and deliberate. I am not calling anyone a liar. I am stating an objective developmental reality, and because your ability to perceive that reality is fundamentally in question when it comes to your child's basic needs, I am invoking my authority to ensure his safety. Karen froze, confusion cutting through her anger. What? This case is dismissed with prejudice, Judge Judith announced, her voice ringing through the studio. You receive $0. You will pay Mr. Chun's court costs of $950 for defending against a baseless claim. Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate mandatory psychiatric evaluation for you, to be conducted before you leave this building today. What? Karen's shriek was primal. Noah began to wail. You can't do that. This is illegal. This is kidnapping. It is legal and it is necessary, Judge Judith stated, unwavering. And it is not the full order. I am also directing Child Protective Services to commence an emergency welfare investigation. A caseworker is present and will accompany you now. The audience was dead silent, processing the nuclear escalation. Liam Chun looked horrified, his hand over his heart. This had gone far beyond winning. Karen clutched Noah, backing away as the bailiff and a woman in a calm, professional suit, the previously arranged psychologist, Dr. Vance, approached. No, you can't take him. He needs me. I'm all he has. You're punishing me for telling the truth. Judge Judith's voice softened, but only a degree. It was the softness of a surgeon explaining a necessary, drastic procedure. Miss Prescott, listen to me. A mother who cannot tell the difference between a baby's cry and a conversation cannot reliably tell if he's hungry, in pain, or ill. That journal isn't a record of genius. It's a map of a break from reality. Getting you help isn't cruelty. It's the most urgent form of care. For you and for Noah. Dr. Vance spoke gently, positioning herself not as a threat, but as a guide. Corinne, my name is Dr. Vance. We're going to go talk, just us. Noah stays with you. We're going to sort this out. Right now, you must be so tired. The fight seemed to drain from Corinne, replaced by a terrifying, vacant exhaustion. She sobbed, her body collapsing in on itself as she rocked the crying Noah. She allowed herself to be let out, not in cuffs, but in a horrifying spectacle of maternal collapse. The courtroom doors swung shut behind them. The silence they left behind was deafening. Judge Judith looked at the cameras, at the stunned faces of the audience. She knew this would be dissected, criticized, and hailed. She spoke directly into the lens. What you witnessed was not a trial. It was a triage. The law sometimes has to recognize when the dispute presented is a cry for help from a different, deeper crisis. My job isn't just to settle arguments. It's to see the human being standing before me, even when they're lost in a fiction. Especially then. She brought her gavel down. Court is adjourned. Asterisk aftershocks of the Prescott case rippled far beyond the studio. Online, the clip exploded. Half the comments decried Judge Judith as a tyrant overstepping her bounds. The other half hailed her as a savior who saw a fire everyone else missed. But the real story was happening off camera. In the quiet office where Dr. Vance began her assessment, Corinne, hollowed out and defensive, clung to Noah. Dr. Vance didn't challenge the delusion head-on. Instead, she asked about Corinne's life. The isolation seeped out slowly. A distant partner working overseas. A family that dismissed her new age ideas. The slow withdrawal from mom groups who found her intense. The internet became her village, a village that constantly affirmed her specialness, Noah's divinity, and the world's hostility towards them. She wasn't fabricating for gain. She was drowning in a self-constructed, digitally reinforced universe where her son was the Messiah and she was his prophet protector. The diagnosis, when it came after a 72-hour hold and deeper evaluation, was severe postpartum psychosis with delusional grandiosity. It wasn't the common baby blues. It was a break from reality, where the brain, flooded with hormones and stress, constructs a narrative to make sense of its own chaos. In Corinne's case, the narrative was that her child was superhuman, and she alone was his interpreter. The cat, the neighbor, the lawsuit, all were plot points in this epic. Judge Judith's order was the external circuit breaker that her crumbling internal world lacked. The CPS investigation, while terrifying for Corinne, revealed a clean, well-stocked apartment, a healthy, well-fed baby, and no physical neglect. The danger was subtler, more insidious, the potential for the delusion to escalate. What if Noah's communications told Corinne to flee? To harm the negative energy of the neighbor? The psychosis was a room slowly filling with gas. Judge Judith struck the match that triggered the alarm before the explosion could happen. Meanwhile, Liam Chun was left reeling. He'd won his case, but felt no victory. He'd been cast as a villain in someone else's mental health tragedy. He reached out through the court to drop the claim for his costs. A small gesture of humanity in the wreckage. Asterisk, the legal and ethical debate raged. Could a TV judge order such an intervention? The show's lawyers had ironclad consent forms every litigant signed, covering extreme scenarios. More importantly, as an acting arbiter in a binding arbitration proceeding, Judge Judith retained certain authorities, especially when presented with evidence suggesting imminent harm. She didn't sentence Corinne to treatment. She referred her based on observable, profound incapacity, and the state's existing machinery took over from there. The power of the moment lay in its terrifying duality. Corinne was both a suffering patient needing compassion and a potential source of danger due to her break from reality. Judge Judith's genius was in addressing both simultaneously: the firm, unyielding hand of the law that stopped the legal farce, and the subsequent channeling toward help. She didn't diagnose from the bench. She recognized symptoms of a crisis that demanded professional diagnosis. Asterisk for the millions watching. It was a masterclass in cutting through noise. While others saw a quirky mom or a scammer, Judge Judith saw a fundamental disconnect between a person and consensus reality, a disconnect orbiting a vulnerable infant. Her role wasn't to therapize, but to protect the judicial process, and, by extension, the child trapped in the narrative. She became the definitive voice of the real world. Breaking through the digital static that had consumed Karen's mind, the case became a landmark, not in law, but in public understanding. It sparked discussions about postpartum mental health, the dangers of algorithmic echo chambers, and the thin line between eccentricity and emergency. It showed that the greatest conflicts aren't between people, but between a person's perception and the world itself. And sometimes, a judge with a gavel and the courage to use it unconventionally is the only one who can render a verdict on reality itself, forcing a necessary, painful reconciliation. Asterisk 30 days later, a follow-up was arranged. The production team, navigating a minefield of privacy and ethics, facilitated a tape segment with Karen's consent. She appeared, transformed. The glazed, defiant sheen was gone. Her eyes were clear, though shadowed with the fatigue of hard-won clarity. Noah babbled happily in her lap, a normal, beautiful baby. She spoke slowly, choosing her words with care. I was in a prison, but I thought it was a palace I'd built for us. The words I heard, they were my own fears, my own loneliness, my own desperate need for him to be extraordinary so I could be special by association. The medication, it didn't silence Noah. It silenced the static in my own mind, so I could finally hear him. His real sounds. His real needs. She addressed Liam Chun directly to the camera. Mr. Chun, I am so deeply sorry. You were never the villain. You were just a person who lived downstairs. I created a story where you had to be the antagonist. I am sorry for the fear and trouble I caused you. She saved her most complex words for Judge Judith. Your Honor, that day I hated you. I thought you were the final boss in the conspiracy against us, but you were the lifeline. You were the one who saw I was drowning and threw me a rope, even though I was convinced it was a snake. You didn't just save Noah from a distorted world. You saved me from losing him completely in it. Judge Judith, watching the tape later, gave a rare slight nod. This was the verdict that mattered, not the dismissal. The rehabilitation. The case of Prescott v. Chun left an indelible mark. It redefined what a win in her courtroom could look like. Sometimes winning meant a plaintiff left with $0 but gained a pathway back to sanity. It meant protecting a defendant not just from a false claim, but from being an unwitting character in someone else's psychosis. For the audience, it was a terrifying and ultimately uplifting lesson that the systems we often cynically dismiss, the courts, child services, mental health care can, when functioning with clarity and courage, interlock to form a safety net. It demonstrated that authority, when wielded with perception and responsibility, can be an instrument of mercy. Judge Judith never spoke of the case publicly again beyond the initial episode, but those who worked with her noticed a subtle shift. Her famous impatience for fools remained, but it was now tempered with an even sharper eye for the difference between foolishness and illness. She could spot a liar at 50 paces, but now she could also sense a breaking point at 100. The legacy of the case is a warning and a guide. A warning about the seductive power of constructed realities, especially those validated by the curated echo chambers of the internet, and a guide to the profound responsibility we bear to one another's grip on the real world. It reminds us that the most important testimony isn't always what's spoken in court. Sometimes it's the silent plea hidden in the delusion, waiting for someone with the discernment and the authority to hear it. In the end, the baby Noah never testified. He didn't need to. His normal, healthy babbling after his mother's treatment was the only evidence the world ever needed. The case was closed, not with a dramatic confession, but with the quiet, beautiful sound of a child being seen finally for exactly who he was. Asterisk. So why does this case years later still grip us? It's because it transcended television. It became a modern parable. In an age where we can all curate our own realities online, where algorithms feed our biases, and where isolation can breed extraordinary internal worlds. Karen Prescott's journey is a cautionary tale for the digital era. Judge Judith's courtroom became an unlikely stage for the ultimate confrontation, documented reality versus immersive delusion. And the judge, armed not with a psychiatric degree but with centuries of common law and street-smart intuition, made the call that psychiatry would later confirm. She acted as the emergency brake on a runaway narrative. Think about the sheer narrative tension. We tuned in for a fight about a cat and a baby carrier. We got a psychological thriller. The twist wasn't a hidden witness or a shocking piece of evidence. It was the terrifying realization that the plaintiff wasn't lying, she was believing. That's a different kind of suspense. It's the horror of the unreliable narrator living next door. The case also forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. How many of us are one step away from our own version of Corinne's journal? How many of our truths are reinforced by communities that never challenge us? Where is the line between having a unique perspective and losing touch with shared reality? And who has the right or the duty to intervene when that line is crossed, especially when a child is in the picture? Judge Judith's actions provide a controversial answer. When the delusion seeks validation from the legal system has not just the right, but the obligation to diagnose the health of the mind presenting the case. She didn't treat Karen, she referred her, using the courtroom as a vital detection tool, much like an emergency room triage nurse spotting symptoms of a heart attack in someone complaining of arm pain. The resolution offers a blueprint for compassionate intervention. It wasn't soft. It was brutally firm. But that firmness was the container that allowed for later softness. The gavel had to fall hard so the walls of the delusion could crack, letting the light of help in. This is the ultimate lesson for anyone dealing with a loved one in crisis. Love sometimes must wear the mask of unwavering, unyielding firmness to be effective. For creators and storytellers, this case is a masterclass in structure. The hook was irresistible. My baby will testify. The rising action was the slow, chilling reveal of Corinne's world. The climax was Judge Judith's stunning dual-order dismissal plus mandated help. The falling action was the real-world consequences and Corinne's treatment. The resolution was the follow-up, showing the healing. It's a perfect 5-act structure ripped from reality. Finally, the story endures because it restores a nuanced faith in judgment. We live in a time quick to condemn judgmental attitudes. But this case glorifies good judgment, judgment based on evidence, experience, empathy, and the courage to act. Judge Judith didn't judge Corinne's character. She judged the fitness of her perception in a matter concerning a child's welfare. It was judgment as a life-saving skill. So the next time you watch a courtroom show, or scroll past a story that seems too bizarre to be true, remember Karen and Noah. Remember that behind the absurd claim might be a profound cry for help. And remember that sometimes the hero of the story isn't the one with the perfect argument, but the one with the clear eyes and the courage to say, this isn't about your case anymore. This is about you, and you need help. That's not just entertainment. That's a public service. And that's why you're still thinking about it right now. If you believe in the power of clear-eyed intervention, share this story. Drop a comment with the word reality below. And never forget, the most compelling stories aren't scripted. They walk into a courtroom every day, often unaware of the drama they truly contain.